Okay.
Okay. Hi, Wilko. You still
Hello,
there?
Mark Emery. How are you?
Yeah,
I'm
good mate.
here.
Good mate. All right. So, we've heard the news. Really, well, it's not new news, but it's something to be celebrated. It's 48 years. Pick up the pieces. Went to number one this week in 1975, and you were there.
I was right there. I mean, I arrived in January 15th in New York City with the Average White Band. And we just finished doing every club, every pub in England. We went to Europe in 73. It was just continuation, just dragging every little gig out there. So we came into New York, went straight to Atlantic Studios. We were there for about 2 or 3 weeks doing things, meeting people. And I wasn't a tour manager back then. Jack Cunningham was. So next thing I knew, we went to Hertz and picked up a 30-foot truck, which was massive. I mean, this was like driving a tank. I had a 3-tonner in England, but this was just huge. Biggest thing I've ever driven. And next thing I know, we're putting all this equipment. Even I didn't know what we were doing, but went to Atlantic Studios and got a bunch of stuff, a lot of recording stuff. And then I started putting suitcases in, and I'm looking at the band, and Bruce goes, "Oh yeah, we're going to Southampton, Long Island." I'm like, okay, first time in the States. Where's Southampton, Long Island? I hadn't a clue where it was.
This was your first
But anyway,
time.
Jack Cunningham and it was first time in the States. It was, wow. And I was going mental. I just loved it. Plus, it was the coldest winter in history, apparently. I mean, I had to go out and I bought this big old American Army overcoat. It was massive. It was so thick. I mean, I looked like I was a mass murderer.
Oh,
but it was just freezing.
It just gets so cold there in January and February, and that it's just it's freezing. You gotta have a big coat, New York coat.
Oh, it was huge, and about 10 more underneath it. You know. So here we go. We get all the suitcases. We get the band going in different cars and all this recording equipment. So off we went, and this 10-bedroom mansion right in Southampton, Long Island. So set everything up, and that's when we start recording Cut the Cake. But we'd also been told by the management of Atlantic Records, don't tell anybody where you are. Nobody should know where you are. We don't want anybody to know what you were doing. So I was like, okay, off we went, So we're there for about 2 or 3 weeks, and we're all snowed in, absolutely snowed in. And I'd never driven in snow like that. The last time I drove in that kind of snow was in Sweden with the Vinegar Joe tour. So after 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, we had to go back into Atlantic Records. So now it's into February and pick up more equipment, more goodies, the whole 9 yards. And all the telephones, cables, all the phones had been down, the electric had been down. We couldn't record much for about a week, maybe 4 days. So off we go down to Atlantic Records, go in the studio, and he's Big Mac, and he was like the security guard, but he overlooked everything. He was like, "Guys, where have you been?" And we were like, "What do you mean, where you been?" And we couldn't tell him. We're just like, "Oh, we're in rehearsal." "Well, the album and the singles, number one." And we're like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, you're number one." And we've been trying to call, we have a number somewhere in Long Island, but we can't, we've been calling it, but it's not picking up. So yes, the power must be down. I was like, well, look at outside. I mean, it's a 2.5-hour drive. We drove for 2.5 hours in
Was the band there? Was the band there when he told you this?
No.
First the band heard.
Just me and just Jack. Well, let me tell you. So we're just like, okay. So we got all our more equipment, and and I got a little bottle of whiskey because and Jack's rolling his joints and having his joints, and I'm like, I didn't smoke back then, and I'm like, well, okay, and here I am driving again in a snowstorm, and I think we got home about 9, 10 o'clock, and as we pulled in, I noticed the lights were on, and I'm like, oh, we got power, and we were just so excited within each other to like go in the building and go, yeah, guess what? Yeah. So we walk in and everybody was bouncing off walls. And they looked at us and they went, guess what?
Okay, so the celebration's happening.
Yeah. And I was like, we just been told you're number one, right? And we're like, yeah, single, pick up the pieces, and the album.
And the album. Unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable.
The rooms, it was so big, people were just walking around in circles, big smiles on the face, whiskey, wine, whatever, because the wives were there. Dan was there. I think Dan was about 5 years old. Molly Duncan's child.
Oh, Dan Duncan, yeah.
Yeah, Dan Duncan with Jeannie, who I used to babysit. Right. And I think he was about 4 or 5, maybe 4 to 6, whatever,
He's about 46 now.
Yeah, he's 46, all right. So, no, he's actually 55, 53.
He's joking, is he?
Yeah, we're 48 on 5, so he's 53, right, yeah. But there's a photograph of me laughing and carry on, which I'll put it on Facebook later. And Bruce McCaskill brought Clark Russell, who's a really good friend of his, and actually worked for the band and also worked with me with the Allman Brothers, and Big Bill. And they were totally Californian. And they came out as guests of Bruce. Bruce McCaskill was the manager, And everybody was ripping T-shirts off and throwing them in the fireplace. I'll never forget that. And I'm going, what are you doing? And they're like, we got so much money, we're going to afford T-shirts now or something like that. And the fireplace was full of T-shirts and, but it was just fantastic to the fact that all the work we had done, and here it was on a silver platter. Well, it was on a silver platter. We worked for it. But here it was, number one. It's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah,
really is. And it changed all of our lives, every one of us,
Yeah.
I mean, that was in February this week. I don't know what exactly the date was, but it was this week. And we went to
48 years ago. So, yeah, it's a pity. Yeah, so that like Molly isn't here, and it has a bit of a sad note to it, but it's a brilliant time. I mean, I knew the guys then, but I wasn't working with them. I started working with them later, but I knew them from London, really well, and I know I can imagine that what a hoo-ha they were having. I mean, they know how to party, those guys.
Well, the thing is,
that's the first album. That was their first album, wasn't it?
Well, it was originally called "Show Your Hand."
Yeah.
And we had to redo the album cover.
Yeah, I know.
That's where the W came from.
Which is actually on my shirt. I don't know whether you can see that.
Oh no, I can see it. I can see the whole thing.
The AWB logo is all coming in here.
Yeah, and
I'll take my hat off to them. I've got a lot of time for those guys.
Well, the first week I was in New York City, which I just loved. I mean, I'd walk 50 blocks. I'd walk for hours in the slushing in the snow, just looking at buildings and pinching myself, going, I'm in New York City. You know what I mean? I'm here. And I was staying at the Mayflower Hotel, the famous Mayflower Hotel, which was another story. It was just classic. But, Jack Cunningham was the tour manager. And he was like, oh, we're going to go to the studio. Go and set up, the band's coming in. I was like, okay. So I walk in the studio, and he's Aretha Franklin, part of the Bee Gees, Luther Vandross, Donny Hathaway, Roberta Flack. And they all turned around when Jack and I walked in. They're like, are you AWB? Are you AWB? And we were like, what? Because I think that was the first realization.
They're all the
People
Atlantic
call
Records people, right?
all on Atlantic Records. I mean, they knew the band was coming in, you know.
And the band had
But
just
we
gone
all,
to, the band had just gone to number one.
well, no, this was in January.
Oh, this should be
But
just before.
yeah, this was 3 weeks before we hit the number one.
Right.
4 weeks, whatever it was, and it was just everybody in Atlantic was bouncing. I mean, musically, everybody was like, the music was intense. I mean, it was just our music. You know, we loved all of that R&B, rhythm and blues,
That's right.
and it was,
yeah, right.
and just being around it and having
it was a soul funky band. I mean,
yeah,
was all into it. I mean, I originally started with rock, but I was a complete convert into the funk with those guys. I just loved it. Yeah.
Well, we all listened to Aretha Franklin. I mean, God, she's
right,
just
Donny Hathaway, all those people.
Donny was brilliant, you know, and but having her just like being excited that we came in because Arif Mardin was our producer and also her producer. So Arif was like introducing me and Jack and I, you know, and we were setting up waiting for the band. And I think that is maybe why they decided to put us out of the recording studio. You know what I mean? And just put us in a house somewhere. And it was actually Ahmet Ertekin's house, the guy who owned Atlantic Records. And he was going back to Turkey for whatever he was doing. I know he's going back to Turkey. I think it was him and Tunch and a couple of the top guys that turned out and said, "Don't tell anybody. Just go and record your album." And you know, and as I said, we had all the 8-track. Everything's in the truck. I mean, it was just great, and it was just absolutely fantastic times. I mean, you know, being in the studio with these type of people. I mean, even the Bee Gees, I love the Bee Gees. I mean, they were like doing their thing, you know. And it wasn't until a little bit later that we bumped into Mick Jagger doing his solo albums, you know, which was fun. You know, a lot of stories there, you know. But anyway, back to the Average White Band. You know, I was with them for 8 years, worked my ass off. I still love them, still speak to them, you know, but all the work from 73, that 2 years, I was with the Tremolos and the Average White Band. How it balanced itself out, I don't know.
Yeah.
And they worked hard. We did 3 gigs in 3 different countries in one day.
Yeah.
It was just unheard of. I mean, I think we made £10 at the end of the day. We were on the ferry going home and we're all like knackered, shattered. It'd been a really tough tour, you know. Well, and it was like, and I was involved with them, you know, back then. But
yeah, I think we made, do all the rough stuff. But then, you know, once they had the hit record, then they're sort of jetting all over the place. You know, they're Lear jets, and they're really living it up. And
well, you know, I mean, we went from we actually went from 300 seated clubs to 20,000 seaters overnight. Yeah, no, I mean, and then about a month later, you know, Jack was just like, "Bye, Jack." You know, he couldn't take the big time. I mean, he was just getting drunk and effed up all the time, and that's when they finally turned around. I think I took over tour management probably around June, July of that year. You know,
75. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the head came off. All of this came off. Armani suits went on.
The suits.
Or the polyester suits, whatever. The polyester suits, you know. And just, it was more like, okay, this is the business. This is what you got to do. You're not in, you know, the Rose and Crown or the, you know, or this pub or that pub. This is it, you know. And we all stayed at the Mayflower Hotel, most of us anyway. And that's another story. That's a rock and roll rowdy story. We haven't talked much about that, but it was just fantastic because the hotel was full of bands. I mean, every band that was in Atlantic, 60% of them were coming from out of town, and they were staying at the Mayflower Hotel, which was right across the street
it's rock
from the
and
Atlantic
roll
studio.
Yeah.
Well, it was you could walk to. It was like less than 2 blocks to the studio, you know. But the one thing I never ever forgot was how cold it was. I mean, I've been in Sweden and Norway, and I'm just like, what is this? You know, but inside of me, I was just bursting with enjoyment and full fulfillment because of what had happened, and it just never bothered me. You know, never wore a hat in my life, and all of a sudden I've got a huge hat down to keep me warm. You know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I was.
Yeah.
I was in Southampton, in the Hamptons, they call it.
Well, brilliant to the
We were in the
AWB,
Hamptons.
yeah, the Hamptons, yeah, very posh.
Yeah, I love them to death. They're still playing, God bless them. You know, every time they come to California, they're still living in New York and Connecticut.
Yeah, yeah.
When they come out here, I always go and see them. You know,
And I'd like to get in touch with Corey again and Ollie. I think they're coming here. That I hope so. Anyway, last time I saw them was here in Exeter. But they were sounding great. I mean, and you know, they're keeping it going. That's the main thing. You know, so and congratulations.
Well, what we should do
is White Band for 48 years.
Yeah, I mean, congratulations. Yeah, and also we look at the schedule because when we're out there April, May, they may be out there. You know, or even if they're out.
We'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, okay. We'll go and interview them.
All right. Okay. Thanks for your recollections there, Wilko. And let you get off to
my pleasure.
Okay. Catch you soon.
Love you, Mr. Embry. Have a good one. Okay. I'm going to be taking I'm going to meet up with Tana Douglas, who wrote the book Loud, on Friday.
Okay.
And she was the first female roadie. She hung out with us all of us in the 70s in London. She was at the Red Lion, the Speakeasy.
Loud.
Tana Douglas. The book is called Loud.
Oh, I'll have to.
So yes, I'm going to take a picture. I'll take a picture of her on Friday and send it in. You know, she's a good friend. Give the book a shout. Okay, I'm out of here. I'm going to go and take some photographs of some hawks, and maybe the whale will be there again.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, don't forget to subscribe and follow us, and we'll be bringing you more news. Look at that's exclusive news. Guy was actually there when that album went to number 1. Yeah. You can't beat it. Rock and Roll Rowdies.
Number one. There it is. Yeah.